No one goes to Hank's for his spreadsheets. They go for a darn good pizza. Lately, though, the shop's been quiet, so Hank decides to bring back the $1 slice. He asks Copilot in Microsoft Excel to look at his sales and costs and help him see if he can afford it. Copilot shows Hank where the money's going and which little extras make the dollar slice work. Now Hank has a line out the door. Hank makes the pizza, Copilot handles the spreadsheets. Learn more at m365copilot.com/work.
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite.
Welcome to Twisted Soulmates, where the scares are always better together. Each episode will dissect the scariest scenes, unravel twisted plots, and discuss what makes these movies unforgettable.
I'm your host, Eddie.
And I'm Ashley.
And together we're here to explore the most terrifying films that have haunted us and audiences for decades.
Turn down the lights and grab your popcorn if you're ready to share our love for horror, with a few screams and laughs along the way.
Welcome to the Twisted Soulmates podcast.
Ever wonder if the planets and stars influenced history's most notorious crimes?
Then welcome to your new favorite podcast. We're Hannah and Joanna, the host of Cosmic Crimes.
Every Thursday, we take the facts of a true crime story and blend it with astrology. We're talking birth charts, planetary movements, and transits on the day of the crime.
The crimes are serious, but are interpreted through our introspective and sometimes unhinged POVs.
Subscribe to Cosmic Crimes wherever you listen to podcasts.
And tune in every Thursday for a whole new spin on true crime.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell you scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse wherever you stream podcasts. Just be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. An important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Growing up in New York City, we mostly traveled on foot or public transportation. If we couldn't walk, we usually took a cab, which we called a car service back in the day, the bus, and of course the subway, which was usually the most efficient way to get around. Even now, if I think about it long enough or recall a specific memory, I can almost hear and smell the subway. If you've never been to New York City or ridden the subway, this next part might be helpful to know. The platform opens up at the bottom of the staircase, with trains usually running on both sides. This wasn't always the case, but oftentimes you could catch a train going in one direction on one side and another on the other side. At the edge of the platform was a bright, thick yellow line, a warning sign that you're getting too close to the edge of the platform, and if you weren't careful, could slip or fall, or even be pushed onto the tracks. Of course, as a kid, I wanted to push the boundaries of what my parents would allow, or not. And every time we got to the platform, I'd inch to the yellow line and peek my head over to look down the tunnel. I would creep closer and closer to the edge until one of them called my name, letting me know my fun was up. After all, the last thing they or I wanted was to end up on the tracks with a train approaching. Today's urban legend comes to us from Japan and is downright horrifying. The story of Teke Teke involves, you guessed it, a tragedy on the train tracks and a vengeful, violent spirit who wants you to suffer like she did. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the scary story of Teke Teke. What happens if you hear the unmistakable sound of her approaching? And is there a way to save yourself before it's too late? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse.
For the moments that matter, choose Curad Naturals. Infused with aloe vera and vitamin E, Curad Naturals bandages protect your unexpected scrapes, cuts, and burns while also moisturizing your skin. Find deeper relief with natural ingredients you can trust to start the healing. When life's surprises call for the best, choose Curad, a deeper level of care. Shop the full collection on Amazon or visit Curad.com to learn more.
You step off the train and look at your watch. It's late and almost midnight. A rush of air blows past as the train pulls away, the rumbling sound fading as it goes. You zip your jacket as the cool of the night sets in, and you notice there's no one else on the platform. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, and the faint smell of brakes and ozone stings your nostrils. You plot a course for the staircase and move quickly, your heart nearly in your throat as you realize your vulnerability. You're almost to the staircase when you hear it, coming from somewhere behind you. You turn and look frantically, trying to convince yourself the sound was just your imagination. Seeing nothing, you breathe deep, hoping the fear will dissipate. This time, it's closer. Squinting, you make out a shape a few hundred feet down the platform. It looks like a person lying on the ground, possibly hurt and in need of help. Hello? I need to get out of here. You turn slowly and keep your eyes fixed on the staircase. It sounds like it's right behind me. Whipping around, you realize the horrible truth of the figure behind you. She's just a few feet away, having moved impossibly fast in mere seconds. She tilts her head up, and one eye locks onto yours through the strands of wet hair. "Where are my legs?" she whispers. A scream hides behind your lips. The woman's legs are gone. In a blur, you're running down the platform, the horrible sound catching up behind you. Closer, closer, until something grabs your ankle, sending you crashing to the ground. Through heavy blinks, you feel the weight of the woman's body press onto yours. Then her icy hands wrap around your throat. And then, never-ending darkness as pain floods your body. Teke Teke, named after the scary sound she makes when crawling towards her victims, is one of Japan's scariest and most enduring urban legends. As you can imagine, and as we've seen with every other urban legend we've covered, there are many different variations of the Teke Teke story, all of which are horrifying and gruesome. In fact, based on my research, many believe it's impossible to trace it to a single origin point. Each locality has its own version. The Illustrated Database of Japanese Folklore, which by the way is a terrific resource, detailed one version of the story as follows. Quote, "In the years after World War II, an office worker in Hokkaido was assaulted and raped by American military personnel. That night, she leaped off a bridge onto the railroad tracks and was hit by an oncoming train. The impact was so forceful that her body was torn in half at the waist. The severe cold of the Hokkaido night caused her blood vessels to contract and prevented her from bleeding out quickly. Instead, she squirmed and wriggled about for help for several minutes. She crawled all the way to a train station and was seen by an attendant. Instead of trying to help her though, the station attendant just covered her with a plastic tarp. She died a slow, agonizing death." According to legend, 3 days after hearing this story, you will see the ghost of a woman with no lower half. The ghost is that of the woman hit by the train. The ghost will try to catch you, and escape is impossible even in a car. The ghost can crawl at speeds of up to 150 kilometers per hour. Some say that the ghost is searching for her legs, which were lost when she was cut in half. Others say she is angry at humanity for not helping her when she was dying, and that she is simply out to slaughter as many people as she can. When she catches you, she will tear you in half and steal the lower half of your body. Shortly after hearing the legend, she will ask you a riddle, either in a dream or in a mysterious phone call. The only way to escape death is to answer her questions exactly the right way. She will ask you, "Do you need your legs?" You must reply, "I need them right now." Then she will ask you, "Who told you my story?" You must reply, "Kashima Reiko." Ka as in mask, Shi as in death, Ma as in demon, Rei as in ghost, and Ko as in accident. If you answer her riddles without mistake, she may just let you live. End quote. In some variations of the legend, a schoolgirl fell onto the tracks and became stuck. Bystanders and station staff offered no help, even as the girl pleaded. Tragically, she was struck by an oncoming train which sliced her body in half. In some cases, she was said to have initially survived the accident and died soon after. In other versions, she died on impact and immediately became an onryo, or vengeful spirit. According to the illustrated database of Japanese folklore, an onryo is, quote, the ghosts of people who died with such strong passions, jealousy, rage, or hatred, that their soul is unable to pass on. Instead, they transform into powerful, wrathful spirits who seek vengeance on everything they encounter. Often they were victims of war, catastrophe, betrayal, murder, or suicide, and they display wounds or marks indicative of the way they died. Their motive is always the same: vengeance. Onryo are easily powerful enough to kill anyone. However, they prefer letting the object of their hatred live a long life of torment and suffering, watching loved ones die in their stead. Onryo inflict a terrible curse on the people or places that they haunt. This curse can be transmitted to others like a contagious disease, creating a circle of death and destruction far more devastating than any ordinary ghost. Onryo make no distinction in their targets. They just want to destroy. Moreover, an onryo's vengeance can never be satisfied, and while most ghosts only haunt a person or place until they are exorcised or placated, an onryo's horrible grudge curse continues to infect a location long after the ghost itself has been laid to rest. End quote. As an onryo, Teke Teke stalks her victims by moving on her hands, dragging her upper torso and entrails, and making the infamous Teke Teke sound, which is caused either by her elbows or lower torso dragging along the ground. When she finds her unwitting victims, she chases them at an impossible speed, and will then slice them in half to mirror her own unfortunate demise. There's something else. She can speak, and if she catches up to you, it's important that you're prepared, because it may just save your life. One article detailed the interaction. Quote, if she catches up to you, she will ask you about her legs, and if you do not answer, she will slice you with her scythe, so you can be just like her. The only way to survive an encounter is to tell her that her legs are at the Maschine Expressway between Osaka and Nagoya. End quote. Something interesting. Earlier, a name was mentioned, Kashima Reiko, and in a fascinating twist, I discovered that Kashima Reiko is a Japanese urban legend that is closely intertwined with Teke Teke. Except, the Kashima Reiko story predates Teke Teke, and depending on which source you read, it is believed she evolved into Teke Teke herself. One article described her story briefly. Quote, there was once a woman named Kashima Reiko. She suffered abuse at home and was bullied at school. With no place to go, the girl considered suicide and threw herself onto the railway tracks. Her lower body was severed, But she didn't die straight away. Her upper torso spent some time crawling around looking for the lower half of her body that had been cut off. To all who hear this story, Kashima Reiko will appear to them within 3 days, late in the night. She will try to take your lower body, but there is an incantation you can recite to drive her away. On the first day, you can chant Kashima-san 3 times to make her disappear. On the second day, you can chant Kawa Kamen Noka, Shiwa Shibito Noshi, Mawa Mamono Noma, and she will disappear. But on the third day, no matter what you chant, nothing will work. To completely drive Kashima Reiko away, you must share this story with someone within 3 days. That is the only way to break her spell." End quote. Part of what makes Teke Teke so scary is that you never know where she is or where she'll strike. And the natural question that comes up is, can you protect yourself before she chooses you to be her next victim? The answer is as varied as the legend itself, with some claiming you can carry a traditional Shinto Omamori charm, which protects the wearer from evil spirits. Or you can avoid walking near train tracks at night, since Teke Teke is said to haunt those areas. Beyond that, there isn't much you can do. We'll continue right after this quick ad break. While researching, I found a really terrific creepypasta about Teke Teke. Sort of. I'm gonna read it for you now. How I Became a Japanese Urban Legend. Written by MollyKittyKat. That is the sound of what is probably the creepiest of Japanese urban myths. Teke Teke is her name. Like a typical American skeptic, I didn't take to the Japanese folklore with much heed. After all, every story seemed to have the same moral: don't go out after dark alone. Therefore, it was only natural to believe that the stories were only a system of keeping kids from wandering off. When one story was proved wrong or ignored, another and more exotic story was made up to keep the children enveloped in pants-wetting fear of wandering off. The stories ranged from that of the slip-mouthed woman to the impossibility of the 50-story skeleton that would gladly tear off your head and drink the blood from your system like you were a juice box. But there were always holes in the story, such as how in the world would a 50-story skeleton have not been spotted by more than one person at a time? Or even how something that massive could ever sneak up on anyone. And even the story of the slip-mouthed woman has its problems. The story supposedly features a beautiful Japanese woman who angered her husband, who in turn sliced her mouth in his rage. Now she goes around with a scarf over her mouth, asking people if she's beautiful or not. If you say no, she takes a giant pair of shears to you. If she says yes, she takes off her scarf and asks the same question again. At that point, you're pretty much screwed no matter what you say, unless you tell her she's so-so, and then make a run for it while she's contemplating what to do with that statement. However, it is never mentioned what happens if you see the giant pair of scissors on her back, or just make a run for it before she asks you anything, or if you happen to be armed and just shoot the girl in the head at point-blank range the moment she takes off the scarf. The story of Teke Teke is similar in ways of plot holes. The story is about a girl who jumps or falls into a subway and gets split in half. How she didn't get pulverized completely is anyone's guess. Afterward, her spirit gets royally ticked off at the world and chases down any poor sap she sees and cuts them in half. Her name is based off the noise she makes as she runs, as her long-nailed hands clack against the ground rapidly. Even if dead spirits were able to interact with the real world, my question is why Teke's so angry? Her tripping and falling onto a railway wasn't anyone's fault besides her own. Therefore, that myth seemed to contradict a rational human mindset. At least that's what I thought. Until I saw her torso sitting on a wall late one Friday evening. In a classic horror story fashion, it was incredibly dark and I was walking home alone. Like I mentioned earlier, I did not take much of the surrounding folklore seriously. I actually thought it was a full-sized girl for the longest time. If I had known that she was the ultimate concentration of horrific, mutilating nightmare fuel, I probably wouldn't have approached her so carelessly to ask if she was all right. However, my good intentions changed to a furious rush of terror when she jerked violently at the sound of my voice and hopped off the wall. Before she even hit the ground, I clearly saw that most of the bottom portion of her was missing. She scurried toward me like an angered spider, making indistinguishable groaning and shrieking sounds as she raced towards me. That's when I took off like a scared puppy, because who wouldn't? I am a very fast runner, and that undeniable fact has been mentioned several times to me by my peers ever since middle school. I would have stopped running after the first few minutes if I had managed to leave whatever was chasing me behind. But the noise did not subside. In fact, as I ran, it grew steadily louder. The possibility of this being an insanely well-configured prank had crossed my mind several times. I had asked for this elaborate joke the moment I bragged to all my friends that ghost stories didn't scare me, or that I didn't believe in ghosts. However, the way that the creature moved, and how fast it went, and how impossible it is to pull off something like this without Hollywood effects or circus creatures, I really had little to believe, except the fact that Teke Teke happened to be the main character of an all-too-true story. But during my rambling and strangely calm train of thought, I noticed something. I got my feet to finally stop and listened. The clicking noise had stopped. A gust of wind swirled around the corners of the alley and wrapped around my feet. Suddenly, a bolt of movement shot past the corner of my eye. I turned around at the strange spurt of the horrendous clicking. However, the moment I focused my ears in to find out where the specter had run to, the clicking quit. I listened to what was now a dead and ominous silence, the type of quiet that would play out in a horror movie before some corpse fell out of the ceiling with its eye sliced out of the sockets and its mouth hanging open in a ghastly scream. I turned back to the spurt of sounds again. My heart pounded so hard I felt like I was going to go unconscious. I should just get out of here, I thought to myself. That was perhaps a bad idea on account of a probable inability to watch my own back while mindlessly dashing. However, my body instantly obeyed, and I took off. As I rounded the corner, I was stopped by the short and legless figure of Teke Teke, who stood on her hands no more than a few feet away from me. My heart leaped up, slamming into my throat and expelling a gag. At the sound of my gag, Teke looked into my eyes. In the light of a street lamp, I actually got a glimpse of her face. In means of symmetrical features and a well-shaped nose, she was actually a very lovely girl. However, the sheer panic of the situation made the beauty matter very little to me. But the scariest thing was, when I gagged, I swear that the pupils of her eyes grew until the whites disappeared from her sockets when she turned and faced me. She raced at me while I attempted to start running again, and lurched like a fierce predator toward my lower torso with both of her hands outstretched. It was unreal how far she was able to jump. I screamed and swatted her as best I could, and I very well managed not to get cut in half. But her claw made a large gash in my side just above the pelvis. I yelled as the blood began to pour out of my side, and in a terribly unintelligent motion, I flopped down onto the ground and onto my back as I bled. By that time, Teke Teke had shaken off my blow and leapt onto my form as I lay on my back. It was at that point that I switched from mildly intelligent survivalist to mindless panicked child. I shrieked and twisted violently to shake her off. Most of what happened during that time was a blur. A bunch of painful slashes of claws and blood till my face was blinded by red. It was almost a surreal nightmare. No, it was a surreal nightmare. Every feeling of panic and terror that you'd feel when being attacked by an angry dog was multiplied by the fact that this unhappy and vengeful creature was less than a dog and far more frightening. I must have blacked out, because suddenly I came to my senses in a railway station. Everything was still blackened, horrendously dark, but I was able to see my hands and a few faint glows of shattered advertising signs. I was unable to recall how I got into the railway station in the first place. I could have crawled there in my wounded state, or Teke Teke could have dragged me there. However, my memory at that point was fuzzy and unreliable. I checked behind my back, and my spine crunched as my torso turned a full 180 degrees when I looked behind me. It didn't hurt, but it produced a strange feeling of relief, like popping your back in a violent manner. I didn't mean to turn myself around in such a grotesque way, but it didn't terrify me as much as one would suspect. When I straightened myself with another abnormal crunch, I examined myself and unintentionally reminded myself of the gash that was laid upon my side by Teke Teke. Now I was able to view the thing in full potential. It was cut all the way from front to back in a clean slice. However, no blood poured from the wound. That was the final revelation that I needed to know why I had been left alone. I'm dead, I thought to myself, still far too shaken to break the silence of the railway station by verbalizing my thoughts. The horror quit at that time, for the revelation that death wasn't quite as terrible as I thought was still sinking in. However, I was quickly distracted by the sight of a young woman walking down a far more well-lit path far from me, not noticing my huge form standing stiffly in the shadows. I was overwhelmed with the feeling that it was my inner purpose to hurt her. I moved toward the girl, my spine moving unnaturally and my torso twisting on and off of my pelvis with a large gash that kept the upper part of my body half holding on. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. What would you do if you encountered Teke Teke one dark, quiet, lonely night? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.